There are life changes, and then there are life changes.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
So when he was here often, we would talk issues, and he was, I think, courageous. Not always in line with my thinking on things, but I think courageous as the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Council of Churches. He is Reverend Donnie Anderson. You may have been following this story in the news. He is now, Donnie Anderson has made a trans process work for her now, so she is here today. And you know, if you feel clumsy watching it, how do you think I feel? It's and you know, she is honest enough to know that this is probably clumsy for a lot of folks. But you know, I've been around too long and done too many of these conversations here. Not to take a position of, listen, if it makes you whole and happy, that's what we're all trying to achieve, right? So I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. I wouldn't go anywhere. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in. If you hear the rain, you know, it's an old building here. It is coming down to monsoon. So if you know, just know, I hope everybody was safe out there this afternoon. And right as you're watching at 7:30, you still may be dealing with some of these post-Florence thunderstorms. All right, speaking of thunderstorms, so we got it in Washington right now. So here's the headline at post time. Like, we are at 1:30 in the afternoon when we record the show for you on this Tuesday. So far, they say there's a hearing. Here's the latest from the network.
In a publicly televised hearing on Monday, Supreme Court Justice nominee Brett Kavanaugh and psychology professor Christine Blasey Ford will face off, describing their memory of what happened during a high school party in the 1980s. Ford told the Washington Post that Kavanaugh pinned her to a bed on her back and put his hand over her mouth at a party when she was 15 and he 17. He was trying to attack me and remove my clothing, she said. I thought he might inadvertently kill me. Kavanaugh said in a statement, I categorically and unequivocally deny this allegation. I did not do this back in high school or at any time.
Never had even a little blemish on his record.
Democrats say in addition to Monday's public hearing, an FBI investigation is needed before the Senate votes on Kavanaugh's nomination.
I don't know. I really don't know. The idea that she offered this information up during counseling sessions a handful of years ago probably lends credibility to this discussion. He had a letter with 65 women supporting him at the ready. Now, that one blows my mind. It's almost as if, and I think it seems pretty clear, that he was ready for something, right? So this notion that the Democrats pulled this stunt late in the game and surprised everybody, listen, behind the scenes Washington is behind the scenes Washington. I think they well knew what was coming here at some juncture. Now, I'm not sure we're going to have a hearing on Monday. I tweeted out yesterday that I thought this might be a week's time to give Kavanaugh some time to withdraw. Because I will tell you, the very establishment white Republican men who are going to have to approach this thing will be a very difficult situation for them. And as long as the cause is consistent, right, conservatism, I would think that just one more visit to Federalist lists and they'll be all set, as long as someone is squeaky clean, right? But who knows? If we actually do have Anita Hill type hearings coming up on Monday, it is going to be some of the worst real-time drama. And for some reason, it seems to me that the President of the United States kind of likes this stuff. I mean, he doesn't care which way it's going. He just likes the action. I don't know. We'll see. Stay tuned for that. Coming home real quick, in North Smithfield, what up with this? A headline here. The council president seems well-meaning, a 25-year veteran of the Rhode Island State Police, but he clearly has no idea what his job is as the president of the town council in North Smithfield.
Motion passes. On the birthday of the Constitution of the United States, North Smithfield residents raised questions surrounding the First Amendment.
The right for those athletes and all Americans to protest is one we all pledge to defend with our lives if necessary.
The controversy comes after former Rhode Island State Trooper, Town Council President John Beauregard introduced a resolution requesting town departments refrain from purchasing Nike products after the company selected Colin Kaepernick as a representative in their new ad.
Soldiers, teachers are role models. Overpaid athletes playing the games of children are not role models.
Residents take the podium defending the former NFL player's choice to take a knee during the national anthem, saying he's protesting social injustices.
As a member of the school committee, I think often of our students. I believe a vote for this measure is, intended or not, going to send a message to our students that it is acceptable for government to punish speech.
But Council President Beauregard says this isn't about football or the national anthem. It's about the negative things Kaepernick has allegedly said about law enforcement.
So far this year, over 100 police officers have been killed in the line of duty. Nike's use of the slogan, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything," is an insult to every one of those police officers and every one of their family members.
The council ultimately voted in favor of the resolution, leaving the crowd shocked.
Okay, look, we're going to put an invitation into the president of the council to talk about this thing, but I'm not going to mince any words. I said on the radio yesterday, this is just stupid. It's just stupid. If he feels strongly about protecting his profession from the Nike marketing plan and from Colin Kaepernick, that's fine. If he wants to start, retired troopers or police officers against Colin Kaepernick's, disgusting remarks about police officers in his mind, that's fine. He's a First Amendment right. Even if he wants to opine once on the council and just speak his mind on the thing, I guess that's fine. But you don't use the auspices of the town and put a resolution in speaking for the taxpayers with one stinking lousy hearing, number one, okay? And number two, what's next? What other council members are going to be offended by something they see on television or read in the newspaper and want the town to take a position on it? I mean, the notion, he said on the radio this morning, the notion is, well, I have the bully pulpit. You have the bully pulpit in a confined way. You have a specific role here. You need to fix the potholes, make sure the roads run, are in good shape, that police and fire are well funded and on time, and all the other various and sundry things that municipal leadership requires, which is plenty. Now, he may not be, I don't know him. I'm guessing he's not a stupid guy. He is a trooper for 25 years. And there's a lot of common sense troopers, thank God, in Rhode Island. But this is nuts. Absolutely nuts. And don't liken this to some kind of, South Africa major regime. This is complete abuse of power. Donald Trump doesn't have the market cornered. All right. Let's. He's welcome to come on in, or anybody else who's got a point of view, like or dislike on that. With me, or I like a good argument here. All right. So here was our guest last time, or close to last time he was here. Oh no, that's actually. Well, it's archived. It doesn't matter. Maybe I should have known by the long hair. I don't know. I just didn't pick it up. Here's the headline that kind of blew everybody back in May of this year, that there was a transition coming, and here was the follow-up from the Providence Journal, and here she is. I may make a mistake on the he/she thing. You know that. Where my heart is on this stuff.
I may make a mistake, and I trust it. Yeah. Yes.
Um,
I'm here because I believe we have an opportunity here to have a sincere conversation, and. Look, I misgender myself once in a while. Okay, so it's hard for me to be. I shared with people early on. I said, I've been socialized as a male for 70 years. It's impossible to think that I would immediately be able to switch to living myself as a female, and after all that socialization, not make some pretty dumb mistakes. So I said to them, I'll try not to take myself too seriously. Don't you take yourself too seriously. Let's laugh a little bit and move forward. And I will tell you that the greatest surprise of this whole thing, Dan, is the number of people who have exhibited support and the depth of that support. It has been beyond anything I could have ever hoped for. I mean, I love Rhode Island. This is where I was born. I mean, this is home, right? But I need to tell you, I love Rhode Island in a whole new way that I could have never shared with you before. Rhode Island has just poured itself out and support me. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's supportive. You get that, right? And
No.
I get that, right?
Yeah.
But this is an amazing community.
All right, when we come back, we'll the story. Stay with us. So again, that was the news that Reverend Donald Anderson is now Reverend Donnie Anderson. Geez, you think you could have made it? You think you could have made it easier on everybody and just like a brand new name or something like that?
If I changed it to Gertrude, that probably would have been harder for folks. No, there really is a story behind it. My name, my first name, had incredible meaning from my mom, and I really wanted to honor that if I could. So I got thinking about, well, what could I do with that? And I thought, well, what about Donnie? Is that, because I think I've heard that as a female name. So I Googled it. So I said, what is D-O-N-N-I-E as a female name? And it comes up and says, in Italian, it's an informal name, woman's name. And I grew up in Western Cranston. I mean, all my friends were Italian. I mean, I feel half Italian, even though there's no Italian blood in me. I mean, I feel Italian because I grew up in that neighborhood. I love Italian. But here's the best part. Do you know what it means? It means the lady. I said,
Perfect.
I got it.
All
This
right.
is perfect.
In the short time that we have, and I'd love you to come on the radio for a longer conversation when you're able to do so. But so 4 years ago, you had this moment, according to a news story that I read. You had this moment. What was the moment?
So I had, all my life, I knew that something was different about me. But as I looked around, there was nothing that really explained me. And so I grew up in a conservative home, conservative religious background. Remember back in the 50s, people who were gay and lesbian were in tough shape. Transgender wasn't even on the radar. And so I suppressed this for a number of years. One of the things that I found, people who are my age who have come out, who have survived to this point, who haven't somehow died or, done some other terrible thing, survived because we learned how to compartmentalize to the max. And that doesn't mean it wouldn't come out periodically, but it did. And probably within the last decade sometime, I really became aware of the concept of transgender and realized that there's a difference between sexual orientation and gender. And that's an important difference in clarification. When I finally came to understand that, and I started to understand what transgender was, I started to ask myself that question, could that be what explains me? Is that what it could be? And so I thought about that for a long time, and finally, about 4 years ago, I just had to finally admit that that's what explained me. And I remember the moment I was in my bathroom looking in the mirror, and I said, you just have to admit it. You're a woman. That's what explains everything. And at that point, I was, in my mid-60s. I just wasn't about to do anything about it, but I felt like at least now I know who I am. But what happened was that admission broke down my ability to compartmentalize. And this really started to just become a bigger and bigger issue in my life, and one that I realized in one way or another I had to deal with.
So, a few months ago, back in May, you decided, I'm going for it.
So actually, it was August of 2017.
Okay.
I realized that if I was going to tell anyone at all, that the first person I had to tell was my wife. And that was an incredible conversation for both of us.
She had no hint?
She had no hint. I think to say that for her this was devastating is an understatement. It just rocked our whole world. What does this mean? We both have had wonderful help from some therapists, some amazing friends who've been supportive, and talking with other people who've gone through this, both other folks who are transgender and people who are married to transgender folks, has been very helpful. And we're working at trying to redefine family for us and working on this together.
She's with you.
She is with me.
Kids okay? How did they buy into it?
My two stepsons had no problem right away. This was challenging for my two daughters, but they have become two of my strongest supporters. I'm just so proud of all of them. Deb is actually at a point now where we go shopping for clothes together. She has incredible taste. I mean, I'm still developing a style and a sense of taste, right? So she's really incredibly helpful, and I really lean on her for some help when we go shopping.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about the Reverend's role in the community, which has been profound. He might have been come from a conservative background, but he's hardly politically conservative. What happens next in that role? Stay with us. Now, listen, I think we could talk all day to the Reverend Donnie Anderson about this transition. Is that the proper word, transition?
Yes, transition, yeah.
Look, I'm sure people have a lot of questions about the intimate issues here. I've always felt like there's a boundary. I was telling you about Stephen Alexander, who we've had on this program, who transitioned from a young woman to a young man, and tremendous athlete, still coaches basketball.
Wonderful
He
man.
scored 1,000 points in high school at Ponegantsit, and others who have gone through this whole thing. And I think there's a place where, you know what, your curiosity may get the best of you, but it's not unlike anybody else who may come here. I don't know that I've asked anybody else about their sexuality, their, what happens, all that kind of a thing. So I have no compunction to go there. Yet I'm glad that your family is together. I'm sure it is a mind blower. There has to be someone in your mix that's not really happy. You could not have gone 10 for 10 here.
Oh, no. Definitely not 10 for 10.
Is there family, or is there, or folks in the Council of the Churches? Are there congregants?
So let me.
What's been the downside? Because this can't all be happy.
No. That's exactly right. And I will say that I did come from a conservative background, and some of the people from that past have not only found it difficult to accept, but have actually been downright cruel and unkind, to the point where they even said some things that have hurt others in my family. I just choose to not deal with that. If someone wants to engage in an open and honest conversation, I'm happy to do that all day long. But if someone is going to try to tell me that I'm not who I am, that God doesn't love me anymore, or that I'm not just as valuable in God's eyes, I have no time to waste on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it makes sense. You, through the Council of the Churches, have been a go-to guy for me in the past, now a go-to gal for me in the future, about stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, do you still have your swag? I mean, swagger. I mean,
yeah.
Am I still calling you because you're active? You're an activist. Are we still going to have some good fights? I mean, what's going on here?
Oh yeah.
I mean, no, seriously.
Yeah, I would say and I don't want any quarter giving because I'm a woman. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm coming at you.
It's not about the gender thing. It's about your confidence level in your transition. I mean, you got your mojo.
Oh, listen. Let me tell you. So the council was unanimously supportive of my decision and have just been so supportive all the way through. They granted me a 3-month sabbatical to go through this transition period. And
I want to hear about that, but since you mentioned that, is 3 months enough?
Well, it was enough to get started.
Okay.
This is an evolving process.
Psychologically, emotionally, physically, all those things. Spiritually.
All those things. Yeah. Transition is not a one-moment event. For me, it's evolving. But what I needed to do was I needed to live full-time as a woman. and start to learn to live into that life. So 3 months got me my jump start. But I will just tell you, and I appreciate it, and I really needed that time. I mean, I really needed that time. But with about 2 weeks to go, about the middle of August, my wife, my friends, people will tell you, I was crawling the walls to get back at it. There are issues.
Were you away for 3 months?
I was home. I went on one small trip to a conference.
No,
but I was
but
home.
you were with family during the period?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And with neighbors and who were so helpful. I just wasn't working every day. But but I'm just as concerned. In fact, I'm more concerned. You know, you were talking about Washington earlier. I mean, one of the things that's happening in Washington is things that we have counted on regarding civil rights and social justice issues that have been protected for us in Washington are being questioned and kicked back to the states. And so the borders of the state of Rhode Island now become the boundary of protection for the people I consider to be my parish, the 1 million people who live here, whether they're Christian, Jewish, or atheist.
Have you, and this is a longer conversation, obviously, we could do 12 shows on this, but have you talked to you run a parish, do you? I mean,
no,
so
no, full-time at the council.
Right, but you used to.
Yes, yes.
Do you do visiting sermons and all that kind of stuff anymore? I mean, do you?
I have not preached since my sabbatical.
If you had
I will. If I expect to be invited.
Good.
People have told me they're going to invite me. So.
Okay, so if you had a congregation, give me the 30-second version of what the theology and the God-centered message would be about this change.
So it's hard to give a 30-second,
right.
But let me give you the starting point. And that is that throughout the course of history, we have superimposed cultural norms upon the Scripture and then identified the Scripture within those norms, cultural norms. I believe that what we've done is taken a binary view, a very strict binary view of gender, and superimposed that upon the Scripture. And that I don't believe that the biblical teaching on gender is anywhere near as strict and binary as it is. In fact, one of the elements for that is there actually is a school of rabbinical thought that talks about several genders within the Hebrew Scriptures that the Christian Scriptures are based upon. So it's a long conversation, and I'd be glad to engage in something. But theologically, we need to really think about this. You know, for example, and this will be the quick and dirty one, right?
I have 10 seconds.
Okay, people thought the world was flat, so they believed the Bible taught the world was flat. Well, we found out the world wasn't flat. We had to go, oh, wait a minute, maybe it really wasn't saying that.
All right. Now that we've broken that ice, not that I felt like we had to, I'd love to have you back to talk more about those things and on the radio side.
Yeah, sure.
I'm glad for you. If you're happy.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm happy for you.
Happy, fulfilled, and you know, people don't have to be afraid of us.
All right. Final word and we come back. The world is changing. To be honest with you, after 10 minutes, I didn't feel any difference. You know, I've known her as a him for a long time, and the him as a her is not that much different, to be honest with you. Bob Flanders with a pretty tough stand on the Kavanaugh thing. He's the Republican nominee for Senate tomorrow, so I'd be around. And be on the radio at 3. We're going to be live in Smithfield at Kenny O's Ristorante, so stop by.